Somewhere in Australia, someone is turning 67 and opening their superannuation statement for the first time in 15 years. The number staring back at them is $187,000. They worked for 40 years. They showed up every day. They paid their tax. And somewhere along the way they forgot, or never fully understood, that the money quietly accumulating in the background was supposed to be the foundation of the rest of their life. $107,000 sounds like a lot, until you do the maths. At a 4% drawdown rate, that's $7,580 a year. Combined with the age pension, it gets them through. Barely. And only if nothing goes wrong, the superannuation system is the most powerful wealth-building tool most Australians will ever have access to. And most of them barely understand how it works until it's nearly too late to change the outcome. Today we're walking through every stage of superannuation in Australia, from $0 all the way to $1 million, what each stage actually looks like, what's holding most people back at each one, and what genuinely separates the Australians who retire with real options from the ones who don't. Here's the core problem with superannuation. It's compulsory, it's automatic, and because it happens in the background without you doing a single thing, most people treat it exactly like that. Background noise. Your employer deposits 11.5% of your salary into a fund you probably chose by default. It sits in an investment option you probably never changed, and you receive quarterly statements that most Australians file without opening. The invisibility of super is its greatest strength as a retirement system and its greatest weakness as a personal wealth tool. Because the people who genuinely win with superannuation are not the ones who set and forget. They are the ones who understand what is happening and actively engage with it at every stage. The average Australian starts their first full-time job somewhere around 21 or 22. Their employer begins depositing super from day one, 11.5 cents in every dollar, straight into a fund the employee barely remembers signing up for. At $60,000 a year, that is $6,900 going into super in year one alone. Most people at this stage know super exists. They just don't think about it. They're focused on rent, the social life, paying down a car loan. Retirement feels 40 years away and entirely abstract, but here's what is actually happening at this stage that almost nobody stops to understand. Every dollar that goes into super before you turn 30 is worth dramatically more than a dollar deposited after 50. Because it has decades to compound inside a tax-advantaged environment where investment earnings are taxed at only 15%, not your marginal rate. $10,000 in super at age 25 growing at 8% per year becomes roughly $217,000 by the time you reach 67. The same $10,000 deposited at age 45 becomes just under $47,000. Same money. Same return. A 20-year difference in timing. A 5-fold difference in outcome. That is the compounding advantage every young Australian is sitting on, and most of them have no idea it exists. The average Australian in their late 20s has somewhere between $20,000 and $35,000 in super. This is the stage where most people are still not paying attention. The balance feels too small to matter. Life is expensive. The mortgage deposit is the financial priority. Super feels like something to deal with later. But two things are happening silently at this stage that will shape the retirement outcome decades ahead. First, fees. The average Australian pays somewhere between $500 and $1,000 per year in super administration and investment fees. Over a 40-year working life, that is between $20,000 and $40,000 in direct costs, and the compounding cost of what that money could have grown into is significantly larger than the fee itself. A difference of just 0.5% in annual fees on a $50,000 balance over 30 years erodes roughly $50,000 from the final balance. 0.5%. Most Australians right now could not tell you what their super fee is. Second, investment option. The default option in most Australian funds is a balanced or life cycle product. It is adequate, but it is not optimal for a 28-year-old with 35 years until they can access their money. A high-growth option with greater equity exposure and historically stronger long-term returns is almost always the more appropriate choice for someone this far from preservation age. These two decisions, fees and investment option, made or ignored at this stage compound silently for the next 3 decades. Crossing $50,000 in super is a milestone most Australians hit in their early to mid-30s, and this is the first stage, where the number on the statement starts to actually feel real. At $50,000, growing at 8% per year, your super earns $4,000 in a single year without you contributing another cent. That $4,000 then compounds on itself the following year. The snowball is small, but it is rolling. By the time the balance reaches $100,000, which for the average Australian happens somewhere in their late 30s, super is generating roughly $8,000 a year in investment returns alone. This is also the stage where voluntary contributions begin to make a measurable difference. Salary sacrificing an additional $100 per fortnight into super costs you approximately $75 out of take-home pay, because contributions are taxed at 15% instead of your marginal rate. But inside super, that money compounds in a tax-advantaged environment for the next 25 to 30 years. A consistent additional contribution at this stage, maintained without interruption, can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to the final retirement balance. The maths is not complicated, the discipline is. At $100,000 in super, the dynamic shifts. Investment returns begin to rival the employer contributions arriving every quarter. At 8% annual growth, your $100,000 earns $8,000. Your employer on a $90,000 salary contributes roughly $10,350 that same year. Your accumulated money is almost keeping pace with fresh contributions coming in. By $250,000, the investment returns overtake the contributions entirely. $250,000 at 8% earns $20,000 in a single year. Your employer on the same salary still deposits around $10,350. Your past contributions are now compounding faster than new money is entering the account. This is the stage where time in the market becomes the single most important variable in the equation. An Australian who reaches $250,000 in super at 40, with 20 years until preservation age, is sitting on an entirely different retirement outcome than someone who reaches the same balance at 55 with only 12 years remaining for it to grow. Same number on the statement, entirely different future. According to ASFA, the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, a comfortable retirement for a single person in 2026 requires a super balance of approximately $595,000 at age 67. For a couple, the figure sits around $690,000. When you cross $250,000 in super, you have passed the halfway mark on the comfortable retirement benchmark. And here is where the maths starts working decisively in your favor. $250,000 growing at 8% per year with ongoing employer contributions of 5% on an $80,000 salary will reach roughly $880,000 in 20 years without any additional voluntary contributions. The people who build beyond $250,000 and maintain momentum are almost always the ones who made two specific decisions. They stayed in a growth or high-growth investment option for the decades their timeline allowed it, and they consolidated super into a single low-fee fund rather than accumulating duplicate accounts that each charged separate fees in the background. An estimated 6 million Australians currently hold more than one super account. Each extra account pays a set of fees. Each may be invested in a suboptimal option. The cumulative drag on retirement outcomes across those duplicate accounts is enormous and almost entirely avoidable. $500,000 in super is genuinely significant. At this balance, a retiree, drawing down at 4% annually, receives $20,000 a year from their super alone. Combined with a part-age pension, which many retirees at this balance level still qualify for under the assets test, total annual retirement income starts to look comfortable rather than merely survivable. This is the balance range where the question shifts from whether you will have enough to how you make it last. And the answer to that question depends almost entirely on how the money is invested during the drawdown phase. Many Australians at this stage move their entire super balance into cash or conservative options the moment they retire, which feels safe. But a 67-year-old retiring today has a statistical life expectancy extending into their mid-80s. That is potentially 20 years of drawdown. A $500,000 balance growing at 5% while drawing down 4% per year is sustainable almost indefinitely. The same balance sitting in a cash option, earning 2% while drawing 4% runs out in under 15 years. How How you invest in retirement matters almost as much as how much you arrive with. $1 million in superannuation. Relative to the median Australian, who retires with somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 in super, $1 million balance is genuinely extraordinary. But it is achievable, and the path to get there is far less complicated than most people believe. An Australian who starts working at 22 on $55,000 a year receives standard employer contributions, moves to a high-growth investment option, consolidates into one low-fee fund, and adds a modest voluntary contribution of $50 to $100 extra per week will, in most modeling scenarios, reach or approach $1 million in super by their mid to late 60s. Not through extraordinary income, not through speculative investment strategies, through 4 simple decisions maintained consistently across a full working life. At $1 million in super using an account-based pension, a 5% drawdown rate generates $50,000 a year. Tax-free after age 60. No age pension required. No dependence on the government's timetable. Genuine financial independence built inside the system that was always designed to deliver it. But here's the honest truth about the $1 million super milestone. Most Australians don't reach it, not because the maths is impossible, because it clearly isn't, but because the 4 decisions required to get there need to be made when the balance is small and the payoff is invisible. And the system has trained most people to treat super as something that happens to them rather than something they actively build. The superannuation system in Australia is one of the most generous retirement frameworks in the developed world. Tax-advantaged contributions. Tax-advantaged investment earnings. Tax-free withdrawals after 60. Compulsory employer contributions that most countries never provide. 40 years of compounding inside a structure designed entirely in your favor, and the average Australian still arrives at retirement with a fraction of what the system was built to deliver. Not because the system failed, because they left every default in place and never once looked up. The Australians who retire with real options share one common thread. They understood early enough that 11.5% was a floor, not a ceiling. They treated their super as an active investment that deserved attention, not background noise to be ignored until 65 low fees. Growth investment option during accumulation, modest voluntary contributions, consolidated accounts, regular engagement. That is the entire playbook. There is nothing exotic in it. The gap between a $180,000 retirement balance and a $1,000 retirement balance in Australia is not luck. It is not income. It is those 5 decisions, made or not made, compounding quietly across a working lifetime. Wherever you are in the super journey right now, whether you're at $8,000 or $350,000, the most powerful move you can make today is to open the app, check the investment option, check the fee, and decide to stop treating your retirement as something that just happens. It's something you build, one compounding year at a time. If this shifted how you see your super, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.